You probably must have been understanding the sector properly. There are a few flashing lights of excellence by some of the ministers. For instance, the lady Abena, for instance, who has been at the ministry before, and so finance before, and so somehow she had some context. But for most others, really, they were just should I call them normal, usual questions, and there was no sense of trying to critique and get into the detail of what actually said. I was a bit disappointed. I mean, let me start off with, for instance, my good friend Arthur Forson. When Arthur Forson was asked to explain by the way, the 2 billion questions that were asked of Arthur Forson came from opinion marking, by the way. Those questions I thought were very interesting, that questions about the explanation to be given to the 24-hour economy, the modeling that may have been done, that he's seen that would enhance the growth for the country. At least Arthur should know by now that if the 24-hour policy, depending on certain modeling around certain real sectors, which he said would matter, would increase the economy by a factor of maybe 1 or 2%. That is not contestable. As a finance minister designate, waiting in the saddles for all this while, a major plank of your policy like that, you should be able to tell us. Even if you thought that there was somebody appointed to be in charge of, 24-hour service, which is Gusitano. But you are the finance minister. You must have seen the modeling, because the president believes in you, and he knows that you are a major plank in that policy. So I didn't get those details, really. The other point also had to do with the 10 billion infrastructure fund, which essentially constitute, if you like, the economic engine for the NDC party. The 24-hour policy plus the 10 billion infrastructure fund. One of the after was asked the question: how exactly do you marry the fact that you want to institute a cap, you don't want to borrow further, and at the same time provide a sinking fund to take care of a rainy day? How would you marry these two with the idea of creating a 10 billion infrastructure fund? So walk us through how exactly you raise that funding in the first year, second year, third year, fourth year. You see, these questions are sensible because we've seen it before. Somebody was promising the 50 billion century fund, that my good friend Kenneth Oyata, Bond.
Yeah.
He was entertaining these kinds of talks. If you guys are not stepping as a country to stop him, we don't know where we'll be. So we need to have proper timelines and serious conversations about that. So I thought those two, for me, didn't come out clearly. And I still would insist that my good friend Nato must answer those questions posthumously, if you like, for lack of a better term. But those really constitute the major plank of the government. Just saying that you increase revenue by reducing expenditure is really not enough. And I thought those questions stood out. But then other questions that were asked of others, maybe Agboja also, showed his marble. I mean, he clearly understood this. But he sort of epitomizes the professional clarity, the experience that a minister should have for a particular sector. I mean, it was clear as daylight. But even then, I would have thought that when he made the issues around when he spoke about the issues about road to, I would have wished we pinned him a little further to asking him what exactly is the policy. Because don't forget, the previous administration has started this process of engaging the private sector to take on road tools. But exactly what should be the investment plan so that it does not necessarily affect government revenues at one point of the year. So that also I thought was also a bit. But I expected the other question to be asked of the Abuja would have been that, look, he talks about the fact that we must provide some clarity to the issues around procurement when it comes to financing infrastructure, road infrastructure, for instance.
Sure.
I mean, I would have thought that he should also given us an opportunity to understand exactly how these projects will be prepared and they'll be bankable, and then ensure that the procurement process are streamlined properly, because it's important. You construct a road, and somebody comes to tell you, I think he mentioned a few things around that area, but you construct a road and they say it's $1 million per kilometer. You need to find out comparable cost, and essentially the person who is telling you want to execute that road for that amount of money, what has been his history in terms of executing roads and all of that. The other crucial point that I thought also would have mattered, you see, procurement issues are important. I mean, procurement is the biggest driver of government spending in this part of our world. And so everybody wants to latch on to it one way or the other. It is good to de-emphasize the issue of procurement and ensure that it is run properly and transparently, but we'll never get there. Sorry, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And so with that in mind, maybe we would have been expecting to require the nominee or the road minister, how exactly his policy, his idea of giving contracts to people would at the same time ensure fairness, but at the same time ensure that meritocracy is not sacrificed. So, for instance, how did you expect that rural-based, women-led and youth-led companies would also get the opportunity to enter the industry without sacrificing quality and value for money? Because procurement is actually used to do that. I think the previous administration tried to use procurement to ensure indigenous participation in the economy, but these were just chronic capitalist arrangements, 10% here, 20% here. Before you see the money is shared, feeding kids are deprived, and then all of that is really bad. I thought also that when the education minister, or when the agriculture minister got to stand, there are a few things that I thought could have also been emphasized. You know, they talk about giving this, what's it called, the farmers, cocoa farmers, is it 6,000 cities per bag or whatever I think. Yeah. Essentially promising to pay a bit better than previous administration. But there was an interesting bit that I thought was lost on the committee. Look, you know, Ghana has committed to phasing out some quasi-fiscal activities of cocoa board, such as financing fertilizer and cocoa rules in the IMF ECF program, right? Mm-hmm. But in the NDC manifesto, they promised to assign a portion of cocoa revenues as health insurance for farmers, operational cocoa farmers pension schemes, introduce free fertilizer program, and continue building various school blocks in cocoa growing areas. I would have thought a question like this would come. As a minister designated for the sector, could you share with us exactly a plan for meeting these quasi-fiscal functions without compromising cocoa board's financial stability? Because my good friend Enrico Poco has cried loud into the high heavens about the fact that cocoa board, obviously, the financial situation is not sustainable. And we have seen the books. I mean, cocoa board has been great to us, I think, many. We've analyzed their books. They even gave us books that are yet to be audited. And they gave us, so we knew all these things from day one. We see all of that. So, and if we use that as a campaign message, which is clear and good, you can then be promising things that seems to be inconsistent with that. And I thought some clarity would have come forward in that regard. Again, you know, it is also important to have, for instance, been asked a question about, you know, the African Union's Maputo declaration where Ghana, African countries are supposed to at least allocate 10% of their national budget to agriculture. Ghana currently does about 2%, if not less than 2%. A question about that would have been useful, because then you see we are getting the plans and understanding of exactly how the program of all the interventions will be financed. Okay. I also would have thought that the question on climate insurance, because climate is a big issue. Don't mind the fact that my good friend Donald Trump doesn't believe in climate change. He said he doesn't like the audacious and quite invasive, pickpocketing nature of governments trying to exact rent from us for adapting to climate. Climate must be adapted through private schemes method, and then I agree with that. But again, I would have thought that the question about climate insurance, which has been one of the proposals coming up and have come up in response to issues challenging weather patterns we've had in the country. A question should have been asked of the nominee, for instance, to ask him why is there no significant uptake of that type of insurance in the country, and what he was going to propose to cabinet. I also thought that, you see, the outgoing government supported various on-lending programs whereby the likes of International Agriculture Development, Fund for Agriculture Development, and Alliance of Green Revolution Africa, they provide matching funds to farmers through certain financial institutions in the country. Unfortunately, the local financial institutions are not interested at all. And because they are not interested, the uptake has been poor. What was he going to do to encourage that? Because you see, government alone should not be in the business of funding everything. So this was a clear example of somewhere a question would have wished that there are other people willing to fund. So why not taking up what are you doing to support financial institutions, at least provide some bulwark against them at least providing the counterpart funding. Instead of setting up funding schemes again, women banking, those things, we are wasting